Today is April the 22nd, 2023, and we are in the final round at the Ready, Set, Debate Spring Classic Tournament. On the affirmative, we have Anusha from the Tiger Club, and on the negative, we have Alan from the Ferret Club. I have 5 minutes on the clock for the affirmative. Anusha, beginning when you're ready.
All right. Are my judges all ready?
Yes.
All right. Is my opponent ready?
Yes.
Okay, I'll be beginning my time now. Hi, my name is Anusha, and I'm on the affirmative side of this resolution. Books should be preferred over movies. In this resolution, books should be novels, chapter books, or any other pages bound together. A movie should be a 1 to 3 hour animation or motion picture. Should means it is the best course of action. Does not have to be the perfect course of action, and preferred should mean it should be acknowledged as a better option. For this debate, we should use the framework of cost-benefit analysis, meaning the judge should decide to win based on whichever side presents the greatest number of benefits over costs. Now I'd like to jump into my case. My contention 1 is health. Subpoint A, reading reduces stress. A 2009 study found that reading for 30 minutes lowered blood pressure, heart rate, and feelings of psychological distress. Subpoint B, books can help alleviate depression. Books have been found to help with depression, anxiety, and other mental illnesses. This is why United Kingdom's National Health Service has begun Reading Well, which prescribes books to people based on their condition. Subpoint C, books help you fall asleep. Unlike screens, books are actually a great activity to indulge in before you sleep. Doctors at Mayo Clinic recommend reading as part of a nightly routine, even for just 30 minutes. My contention 2 is accessibility. Subpoint A, cost. For movies, you need to buy streaming services, movie tickets, devices, etc. However, for books, they're free at libraries and accessible by anyone. My subpoint B is time. Books can be stopped and reopened at any time. You can always take a pause in reading, and there's never a requirement to read the whole book at once. Movies, however, tend to be watched all at once. And while you can pause it and come back, this definitely can't happen in a theater or if you're watching with others. You'll likely need to finish the movie. Contention 3, knowledge. Subpoint A, imagination. Books need a fair amount of imagination, a lot more than movies. In a way, the reader is a co-author, as they have to read between the lines and fill in key details about the plot, characters, and what the characters are thinking of. Each person will have a different interpretation of events, making a book more discussable as well. However, in a movie, the plot and characters are all laid out, and while some things are open to interpretation, there is not much. Movies can help you grow your imaginative skills and show you create. Movies cannot really help you grow your imaginative skills. Subpoint B, literary devices, metaphors, anaphora, multisensory imagery, personification, oxymorons, and other textual details will help to give the story a lot more depth and multiple dimensions. The author's writing style and specific word choice can change the entire meaning of a passage. Subpoint C, helps you empathize. According to National Library of Medicine, books and characters help people understand others' beliefs, opinions, and biases better, even when they differ from one's own. Subpoint D, analyzing. Books can be analyzed, annotated, and reread. They provide a plethora of things to learn about, such as grammar, literary devices, vocabulary, and even more. They're also important for one to develop their own writing style and make their writing more interesting. And lastly, subpoint E, discussion. Books as well as movies can lead to insightful discussions on online blogs, forums, and social media. They're a good way to learn about other interpretations of the book and to make friends. Reading books aloud is also a great bonding experience with the loved ones. Another one that books have on movies are book clubs. These are very common and can be found in your community school or local library, and can help you form more connections, friends, and increase your knowledge. So just to recap, I have provided many benefits of books over movies, including health, accessibility, and knowledge. Thank you, and I'd like to yield the rest of my time to the judge.
We have 2 minutes on the clock for cross-examination by Alan of Anusha, beginning when you're ready.
All right. Judges ready? Is my opponent ready?
Yes.
2 minutes on the clock, starting my time now. So can you please repeat your contention to subpoint A?
My contention to subpoint A was cost. For movies, you need to buy streaming services, movie tickets, and sometimes even devices to watch movies on. However, for books, they are free at libraries.
All right, thank you. Can you please repeat your definition for the word novels?
Okay, so for books in this resolution, it's any a collection of papers bound together that tell a story or inform you. It can pretty much any book, audiobooks, electronic books, and paper books all are books.
All right, so can you please repeat your definition of the word movie?
Movie should be a 1 to 3 hour film, usually animation or motion picture.
All right, so can you please repeat your contention 3 subpoint B?
My contention 3 subpoint B was literary devices. So there is a plethora of literary devices such as metaphors, anaphora, multisensory imagery, personification, oxymorons. There's so many, and these give depth to the story, multiple dimensions. Writing style, word choice can change meanings and just help the reader have a greater depth of the story, a greater understanding. It's a lot more engaging.
All right. Wouldn't you agree that environmental protectionism is a good idea?
Sorry, can you define what that means?
Perhaps protecting the environment from emissions of carbon dioxide?
Okay, so while creating more paper books does mean that maybe it's not saving the environment, there are other alternatives such as audiobooks or online books that are also accessible at libraries.
So just to clarify again, can you please repeat your definition of the word books?
So I did say that books included audiobooks, online books, and paper books.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, judges ready? Does my opponent ready? Starting my 7 minutes on the clock, starting my time right now. Books and movies are both used for many purposes, but the main one is for entertainment. When you feel bored or you just need something to do, people often turn to these two types of things. Despite this, it's almost impossible to have a debate on whether which one is more interesting, engaging, or educational, as both of them are made in a way that can be all three. Instead, we should focus on the bigger problems at stake, which is that we as consumers have a responsibility to protect the environment. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alan. Today, I negate the resolution books should be preferred to movies. This debate should be weighed on the consequentialist framework theory framework, which is similar to the cost-benefit analysis, so I'll just adapt theirs, which is essentially cost-benefit analysis is where we weigh the costs against the benefits to see which side has better outcomes in the end. So firstly, I would like to contest my opponent's definition of the word book, because my opponent likes to leap in the online books into this definition of book. And here's why I don't think that's true. Because in that case, I feel like it would be closer to an article than a book. Because according to the Merriam-Webster, the book can be defined as a written or printed work consisting of pages glued or sewn together along one side bound in covers, which would not really be considering ebooks, because ebooks are not really traditional. And I think that ebooks would probably fall into the definition of articles better, which is totally something else and outside the scope of this debate. Now, moving on into a brief rebuttal of my opponent's points. Actually, no, I'm going to go into my points first. So, contention 1, environmental harms. Subpoint A, deforestation. According to the Commercial Waste magazine, the paper needed for books is responsible for roughly 14% of deforestation worldwide. This means that more than 1 billion metric tons of carbon is released every single year due to the demand for paper that is needed for the production of the billions of books sold every year. With this huge amount of deforestation and pollution, it can cause a massive amount of damage. In the current world, the ice is melting, temperatures are rising, and the disasters are happening in the recent future if we continue to allow for the countless amount of trees to be cut down. Furthermore, deforestation causes the destruction of habitats, bringing the indefinite disruption of ecosystem, which can be really bad, as many important species can go extinct simply due to the fact that we are cutting down all of these trees just so we can make books. As a consumer, you have a moral duty to save the environment, as it could potentially impact you and those around you. Subpoint B, energy usage. According to custom-made.com, producing one book consumes 2 kilowatt hours of fossil fuels and approximately 7.5 kilograms of carbon dioxide. This means that making millions, if not billions, of books every single year is going to cause massive amounts of energy to be required, which further exacerbates the issue of climate change. For example, the factories that make paper in Quebec are the second most energy demanding factories in the country besides aluminum refineries. This means that books will continue to further the issue of climate change, and with the massive amount of emissions needed to produce, the raw materials to manufacture and mass produce the book, it's going to be a disaster. Now, of course, what are the impacts of this? What are the impacts of climate change? Well, the impacts of climate change is that raising temperatures, and that will lead to many disasters, greater natural disasters that could wreak havoc upon the lives of humans. And in fact, that has already been proven, because according to the International Monetary Fund, $1.3 trillion of of our economy is wiped away every single year because of climate change and climate related issues. So yes, this deforestation by the books does have a massive impact when it comes to the economy. Furthermore, when temperatures rise and there's a lot of emissions, it leads to lower air quality. And why is that bad? Because when you breathe in bad air, a lot of really bad things can happen. For example, your lungs can go bad. You can have allergies, asthma, or many other diseases. You can even have heart failure or respiratory infections. All of these things cause premature death, cause people to feel really bad about themselves because they're sick, and also causes a lot of people to just get really, really sick to the point where it could cause a lot of money in terms of healthcare costs. So overall, climate change is not a good thing, because when we emit that much emissions and carbon stuff is absolutely devastating for our economy, for our society, and for our environment as a whole. Never mind, I'm going to continue on into my opponent's case and giving a brief-ish rebuttal about my opponent's case and show you why her points are not really as big impacted as my points are. So first of all, my opponent talks about health and how you can de-stress and you can solve depression and you can get more sleep. So I'll attack this one at a time. So first of all, my opponent talks about stress. Now, once again, this point is non-unique simply due to the fact that movies can also deal with stress. When you go online and watch a movie, you can often feel a lot of connection to the characters, which could drill you deeper into the show, which makes it so that you could be perhaps a little bit less stressed, because often that is one easy way to get away from the stress. Furthermore, my opponent talks about depression. Same thing. You can watch a movie and you'll feel the same way. And also, when it comes to books solving depression, the reason that it is, or perhaps maybe solving depression, is because of the fact that it's entertaining, and movies can also be entertaining, and they can keep your mind off of the bad things that are happening. So yes, movies can also solve depression, keeping this point non-unique. Thirdly, my opponent talks about sleep. Now, when it comes to this little bit of extra sleep, I don't see how that is really important in the grand scheme of things when we're talking about big issues such as climate change. Furthermore, the risk of movies taking away sleep from individuals is really small when you actually watch them responsibly. Now, contention 2, talking about accessibility, about cost and how it's going to cost a lot more. Now, this is not true, because when it comes to buying the book and going to the movies, it's roughly the same cost. But my opponent brings up the example of libraries, but libraries don't just get books out of thin air. The government has to pay for them, or the local people have to pay for them. So yes, you're still paying for the books, even if you're getting them for free on the library. Now, my opponent also talks about time, how it's apparently more time efficient. This is not true, because the average book is 200 to 400 pages, and the average consumer reads around 40 pages per hour. Or if you're fast like me, it's 60 pages per hour. But on the average person, it's 40 per hour. So that means you have to spend around 6 hours to read a book. Or if it's a long book, it could be as much as 10 hours. So my opponent's contention on time doesn't really stand. Now, my opponent's third contention talks about knowledge, imagination, and how there's figurative language. Basically saying that books are really good because they teach you knowledge and figurative language, analytical language, and all of the rest, all that good stuff. However, once again, this is non-unique, because movies can also teach you a bunch of stuff. They have entertainment value, they can teach you the value of relationships, and they can also teach you perhaps literary devices, because a lot of movies do include that stuff. And they also talk about imagination. That's non-unique, because movies also can empower your imagination to think about many different things. Now, finally, subpoint E, which is kind of detached from the rest. My opponent talks about how you can discuss, once again, non-unique, because you can also discuss with your friends and your family about movies. And even if you were to discuss about books, that wouldn't be really productive, because typically, not really happening, because typically when you join a book club, you're supposed to be reading, not discussing it all the time. So in that case, I think that point is non-unique. Overall, Judge, I have shown that my world in movies are much better than books. Thank you for listening.
Excellent. We're going into a cross-examination by the affirmative of the negative. 2 minutes on the clock, beginning when you're ready.
So are my judges ready? And is my opponent ready?
Yes.
All right, I'll be beginning my time now. So you said for many of my points in your rebuttal that they were non-unique, correct?
That is correct.
So first I talked about stress, heart rate, feelings of psychological distress, etc. But you said movies may also reduce stress. Where is your evidence for this?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that I'm using sort of the logic that you're using, which I assume is you're saying that books calm down people and de-stress them because entertainment value. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm saying that a study found that books do all these things, but there is no study that you have found that movies do them as well. You're just assuming them by logic, saying that studies find these things, but I mean, saying that books may reduce it for a certain reason, but you don't know that, correct?
So if I may ask, how would you determine, based off the study, what was the method of determination to find out that books do cause de-stressing?
I'm not sure, but I can check on that later.
Okay, because I would say using a similar logic of entertaining and causing people to perhaps keep their mind off of something else. I'm using not evidence, but logic in this case. I think it's pretty clear that when I use that sort of logic, I can tell that movies do have the ability to de-stress people.
Moving on, how are ebooks not books?
Because as stated previously, when you use the definition of books and you talk about ebooks, I feel like that falls better under the definition of something called articles, which are online. Pardon me?
Ebooks are actually multi-pages. They're pretty much the same as printed books, just scanned online. How are they not books? They are not articles.
Because they actually are very different from regular books, which we typically associate with something that is probably in our hands, that is made out of paper. Now, when you talk about ebooks, right, it takes away from many of the benefits that you're talking about. For example, sleep and depression, because those ebooks can cause many of the bad things that are going on.
I'm talking about both books and ebooks, not just one or the other. But I think they should both be considered as books for this debate.
I think very well then. We shall consider them as books.
If affirmative, you have 4 minutes on the clock when you're ready.
Okay. Are my judges ready? And is my opponent ready?
Yes.
All right, I'll be beginning my time now. Hi, once again, my name is Anusha, and I'm on the affirmative side of the resolution, books to be preferred over movies. Just to clarify, from prospects, we have determined that ebooks are a type of books. Now I'd like to jump into a line-by-line rebuttal of my opponent's case. My opponent only had one contention, environmental harm, and I will group all the subpoints into one quick rebuttal. While paper books do harm the environment, movies are, first of all, not solving that problem. And second of all, ebooks and audiobooks do exist as other alternatives if my opponent is worried about the harm books might make on the environment. Books already printed are still helpful and have health, accessibility, and knowledge benefits to people. We do not necessarily have to print more books, and ebooks and audiobooks can take over in the near future. Now, I'd like to go into some rejoinders for my case. In response to my contention on health, about reducing stress, lowering blood pressure, lowering heart rate, lowering feelings of psychological distress, alleviating depression, and etc. What I have to say is I checked my source, and apparently, according to the 2009 study at the University of Sussex, reading can reduce stress up to 68%, and it works better and faster, and I quote, better and faster than other relaxation methods, such as listening to music, watching TV, or drinking a hot cup of tea. Did you notice something there? Watching TV is not as effective as reading books. So while my argument may be non-unique, books still provide a greater benefit over that of movies. Next, I talk about helping fall asleep, and my opponent simply said this is not really important. Yes, it is important. Helping fall asleep is an issue that many people these days face. In our modern world of screens, many people are going to bed very late on their phone, and this does not help them sleep. Books are a great activity to indulge in, according to Mayo Clinic, and this is quite important in our world today. Next, I talked about accessibility. For cost, my opponent says, yes, books cost money, and they cost about the same as going to the movies, so my point might be redundant, but in libraries, the person who is reading the book, not the government, the person who is reading the book, it does not cost anything for them. This is significant. Books do not cost money, and that is a big deal. They're much more accessible. You do not have to spend money to get all of these net benefits that I've discussed. Next, time. My opponent said books take more time, which is true, but what I'm saying is you can pause the book. The book can be stopped and reopened anytime you want. You can read it anywhere. It's portable. Anywhere, anytime is when you can read a book. Movies, not so much. They are typically watched all in one sitting, and they're not portable at all. Next, I talked about knowledge, and my opponent said lots of movies include these things such as literary devices, analyzation, discussion, etc. And he did not respond to my point on helping empathize with others. So what I have to say to this is my arguments are definitely unique. You do not go and rewatch movies and analyze them. No one does this. It's a huge waste of their time. Like I said, books are much more time convenient. You can reread them, you can annotate them, you can discuss them in book clubs. Yes, movies and books both have online discussions and forums, social medias, friends, etc. But book clubs are a one-up on books that movies do not have. This is a big point. Book clubs can be found almost anywhere, and movie clubs, I've never heard of one. And in addition to this, my opponent talked about imagination. Books need a fair amount of imagination. Movies do not. In movies, everything is laid out for you. You can see it all. There's nothing to imagine, nothing to fill in for the reader to do anything in themselves. I mean, for the watcher to do anything in themselves. In books, you have to read between the lines and understand the multidimensional depth of novels and even picture books. Every book has depth to it. Every author has their own influence, and every reader does as well. Movies, not so much. Thank you, and my time is up.
Negative, you have 5 minutes on the clock beginning when you're ready.
All right. Judges ready? Is my opponent ready? Right. 5 minutes on the clock, time right time now. Hello, everyone. As you may know, my name is Alan. Today, I'm representing the negative side of this debate. Books should be preferred to movies. So first of all, let's get off straight into, I'm just going to do some impact on this debate and fight my points against my opponents. So first of all, health. That's one of the key issues of this debate. So when it comes to health, health is a really big thing because everyday life, for us to survive, we have to maintain good health. That's pretty obvious, right? But when my opponent talks about how movies, my opponent is essentially responding to my climate change point, saying that ebooks and audiobooks are the alternative to books, but that's not relevant because that's not the state of play right now. The state of play is that 14% of all deforestation is because of these paper books. Now, if my opponent wants to change this in the future, fine, that's up to them. But that's not in the scope of this debate. Right now, we're talking about how books are right now. And right now, 14% of deforestation to make the paper required for these books is because of these books. So the impact of climate change is still very, very much real. All right, though, so let's weigh the health impacts of my opponent, which he brings up, and my impacts of climate change when it comes to health. So what happens when climate change occurs? Well, the air is polluted, the temperatures are rising, and this leads to many, many bad health outcomes. For example, when you breathe in bad air, it leads to many bad issues. For example, when you breathe in a lot of bad air, you can get asthma, you can get allergies, you can get difficulty breathing, lung problems, you can get cancer, you can get respiratory infections, you can get acute bronchitis. You can have a lot of many diseases that are really bad for the humans. Now, what's the benefits that my opponent brings up? Well, you might be a little bit less stressed. You could perhaps be a little bit less depressed, and you might get 15 minutes of extra sleep a night. Those impacts are very small when you could get potentially life-threatening cancer from the fact that my opponent is emitting so much CO2 in the air to the point where the air becomes unbreathable and extremely infected. Take a look at Beijing. That's what happens when too much carbon is released into the air. The air becomes foggy, soggy, and dirty. And when you breathe that stuff in, you get a lot of respiratory diseases that could hurt your lungs and probably even kill you. So when it comes to health, my impacts are way on a different level than my opponent's impacts. Now, my opponent talks about accessibility and the economy. So let's talk about that. My opponent talks about how it's going to cost a lot more. And the response to that my opponent gave is that the cost for the reader is zero. Now, let me ask you, Judge, where does the government get the money? Probably not from thin air, right? Because the government gets its money from the citizens. And guess who the citizens are? The citizens are the readers. So these readers, this means that the readers are actually still paying for the libraries and for the books, simply because of the fact that they're paying the taxes to support the books. Now, my opponent talks about time and how you can pause a book, but you can't pause a movie. Now, not all movies cannot be paused, first of all. And even if it is the case that books can be paused, that impact is so incredibly small, and I don't see how that is relevant at all. Furthermore, if you pause a book for too long, then perhaps you could forget parts of the book, which would actually go against my opponent's third contention. Now, going into my opponent's third contention, my opponent talks about how there's a few individual benefits, such as imagination and literary devices, how you can improve your English. But we already have that in English class, so I don't see how this is necessary, because these devices are already taught in English class all over the United States. And that is a state of play right now. We don't really need more of this imagination stuff because it's already being taught. And quite frankly, my opponent's policy is kind of redundant because these points are already very much taught in English classes. And while more would be nice, it's simply not needed. Now, my opponent says that I dropped the emphasizing point. Now, I don't see how this is relevant to this debate at all, because when you read a book, you can empathize, but if you watch a movie, then I'd say you're more likely to empathize simply because of the fact that you're actually connecting with the characters who are moving and causing motion, which really does appeal to people. So overall, Judge, I think that the impacts that I have brought up are much greater than my opponent's. So let's just take a look at the impacts. All right. Under my opponent's plan, which by the way does not guarantee the replacement of all books with ebooks, because that's outside the scope of this debate. It means that so much emissions we put into the air, and that causes so many diseases. Because when we talk about health, my opponent talks about perhaps like 15 minutes of extra sleep a night. I'm talking about death. I'm talking about cancer. I'm talking about the most deadly diseases known to man that you can get because of this climate change issue. And books are not doing anything to help it, because books are one of the main reasons that are causing deforestation, which is one of the main reasons causing climate change. And this means that under my opponent's plan, people will continue to get sick at higher rates than under mine. And this is a massive impact, because when people get sick, they die. Thank you for listening.
Affirmative, you have 3 minutes on the clock, beginning when you're ready.
Okay. Are my judges ready? And is my opponent ready?
Yes.
Beginning my time now. Hi, my name is Anusha, and for the last time, I am on the affirmative side of the resolution books should be preferred over movies. So first, I'd like to weigh out some of the greatest impacts in this debate. Obviously, one of the biggest issues in this debate was about health and environmental damage. So in response to my opponent's point about environmental damage, my opponent has not acknowledged that big budget feature films have a carbon footprint of over 3,000 metric tons each, which is equivalent to more than 7 million miles driven by a regular car. And small films have a footprint of nearly 400 metric tons, equivalent to about 100 miles driven by a car, according to Scripps News. This is also a big addition to environmental harm, which my opponent is not at all acknowledging in his case. So his entire case is non-unique and also applies to me. Next, I'd like to go into some quick rejoinders and impacts of my case. My case talks about reducing stress, blood pressure, heart rate, etc. This helps you get the opposite of sick, which is a big thing my opponent has been stressing in this entire debate. Lower heart rate, lower distress, lower depression, helping you sleep. The average adult gets less than 7 hours of sleep. This is not nearly enough sleep as we should be getting. All of these things are big impacts for the world today. Next, accessibility. Yes, people are paying for this through their taxes, but really, the cost they pay through their taxes for books and libraries is so minimal compared to the benefit one can reap from it. Up to 50 books can be checked out from a local library in any place at any time. This is very, very, very big benefit for people, especially with all the health and knowledge benefits coming from it. Next, time. My opponent says time is not a big deal. It's not relevant. Time is a big deal. As our world develops, people's lives get busier and busier. As I already said, the average adult gets less than 7 hours of sleep. It gets less than 7 hours of sleep at night. Movies are usually a night activity. This will further reduce their amount of sleep. Time is a big deal, and books are a great source of entertainment compared to movies that can help solve this problem. Next, knowledge. My opponent talks about how all these things are taught in regular English classes. However, imagination is not a skill that can be simply taught in English class. Creativity has to be developed by yourself, and books help do that. One has to develop their own writing style. They have to have their own understanding of things rather than just being taught about them in a classroom. And books are what push to do that, while also be entertaining you greatly at the same time. I talked about discussion and helping you empathize. Yes, my opponent does agree. This will help you empathize, and movies might help you empathize too. But the study from the National Library of Medicine talks about books and characters being the ones that can help empathize, not movies. And this is for a certain reason. Books should be preferred over movies. That is why the judge today should consider casting their ballot for the affirmative side. Thank you, and I'd like to yield the rest of my time.
All right, all of the ballots are in. So we are going to go over to our judges now to go over feedback. Who wants to go first?
I can.
All right, let's go to Hannah.
Okay, so first, obviously, both great job on both sides. Speaking was amazing. The case construction was well created, and everything was well researched. So great job to both on that. The big arguments that I had written down that I think could have used just a little bit more work regarding the argumentation against Alan's case on Anusha's side. So I think the biggest issue that I had was just it lacked a little bit. So I wanted more from the actual argumentation against Alan's case and not so much on his responses. The responses that you gave to the responses he gave were great, but the case I think was more important here because the entirety of the case was about the detriments of climate change, and it roped printing books into that. So the questions that I wanted and the arguments that I wanted were, how do we know that movies are more environmentally friendly? How do we know that emissions aren't being produced during the filming of movies and things like that? So I think the biggest issue that I had was there. The only other real critique that I had was just to make sure that your definition from the very beginning is the same all the way through. So at the beginning, you mentioned the definition of books, but you did not include ebooks into that definition. So when we got to cross-examination, we actually did get that included into it, but it wasn't until cross-examination that we got that. So just make sure that that's maintained throughout the entire way. On Alan's side, I really liked the argumentation regarding the book definition. I'm really glad that you called that out because that was something that I was thinking about. However, I would just make sure to stick to your guns on that argumentation to make sure that everything is exactly the way that you wanted it to be. I loved the creativity in your case. I thought that you came at it from a really different perspective, which I really enjoyed. However, I did want more about movies in your main case, which we didn't get into a lot. And if we're comparing books versus movies, we kind of lacked on that side here. And then the final issue that I had was the argument about ebooks being articles. I did flow in favor of the affirmative on that argument specifically because ebooks are just much too long to be considered articles, in my opinion. So all of that said, I think, again, both did a wonderful job. Ultimately, though, I did flow in favor of the negative. So I am casting my ballot for the negative, Alan.
Great. Next person I see on my screen is
I have a
Kinesia.
question.
So, sorry, what was that?
I have a question for the judge.
What's that?
So, if I was put in that awkward situation of ebooks being books or not books, how would you say is a good way to defend my definition stuff?
Yeah, so I think the biggest issue within the definition that was provided in the very first speech versus in cross-examination was that there was a pretty big change from that definition in the beginning to cross-examination. So I would have called that out in the very first speech and would have said, there was a really big shift between the original definition to what we have now. So I would like to go with the initial definition that we received in the first speech from the affirmative, which did not include ebooks. And I just would have continued forward and continued to refer back to that.
Thank you.
Cool. So the next person I see on my screen is Kinesia. We're going to have her go over her feedback next.
Okay. So I picked Anusha as the winner because I feel like she made a stronger case overall with more elements. I go into the accessibility of books, the psychological impact, and how that can affect health as well, like physical health. I did like Alan's argument of environmental protection, but there at the end, Anusha's statement about the carbon footprint of filmmaking kind of destabilized that. I think in the future, it would help Anusha to bring that up much earlier because, as Hannah said, she spent most of her time kind of arguing with his counterpoints to her arguments rather than his argument itself. And I also do agree that Alan should be a bit more firm on his definitions. If his argument is based entirely on environmental protection, then hold steady to that as the subject of your argument rather than accepting that ebooks can count because you did have a definition of like books as a physical thing, not so much the virtual option. Providing evidence, both of you guys did a really good job on that, and actually had a lot of numbers I was not expecting to have. Overall, just I think both of you did a great job, and I think you guys can use what you learned here in the future. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool. Let's move on to our final judge.
Okay, so I just want to say that both of you are absolutely amazing. I enjoyed watching y'all's rounds and judging some of y'all's rounds. But for this round particularly, I think really Hannah hit it on the head, talking about the change between the definition at the beginning and how it changed during cross-ex. That was a big thing for me whenever I was judging, trying to figure out where I was going to cast my ballot. I think the only other thing that I have to say is for Alan, sorry, I'm looking at my notes. I really enjoyed the questions during cross-ex. However, I just wish you would have went like a little bit deeper and kept probing the affirmative side, because you almost got her to agree with something that could have really helped you in the long run. But you just it felt like you kind of just gave up. If you would have just kept probing or rephrasing your question in a way, I think that would have really gotten her to agree. But other than that, I did cast my ballot for the affirmative. I feel like she really had a lot of good evidence, and there were more benefits on her side. So